right? It starts at hello. It
Yeah.
starts with a handshake. It starts with eye contact. It starts with the right words that trigger the right pictures, that trigger the right emotions. That's the key. So it's like anything else. You never have a second chance to make a first impression, right? So when you use the right words that trigger the right pictures, that trigger the right emotions, then people will engage and they'll take action. So,
and what I see a lot of old school sales trainers train them how to be is what I call product pushers. Okay, so here's my question for each one of you today, wherever you are listening in, is have you ever wondered what it takes? Like, what does it actually take to be a top 1% salesperson, a top 1% coach, a top 1% consultant, a top 1% entrepreneur, a top 1% speaker, and whatever you sell? My next guest, Mr. Charlie Cina, is going to answer that question for you. So let me give you a small taste of this man's background. It is very extensive, but we kind of honed it down into a few paragraphs. So Charlie is known to be able to captivate his audiences and teaches them how to master the right mindset, missions, and moves to reach their personal potential to drive massive revenue. Through his writing, speaking, and consulting, he's built a vast group of followers known as, I like this, disciples of sales. I love that term. Charlie believes that the ability to present and persuade are necessary life skills that everyone has to master if they want to succeed. And he will teach you that your primary responsibility in business is to expose your brand, expose your products, your services, and expose your solutions to build long-lasting revenue relationships. Charlie leveraged his expertise in sales and marketing to work with and collaborate with billion-dollar brands. He's acquired clients that are top motivational speakers. If you've heard of these in the world, Tony Robbins, everybody should know who Tony is. Les Brown, everybody should know Les, and everybody should know who Eric Thomas is. He works with them. And his 30 years of boots on the ground and under fire sales experience has led him to create proven techniques and strategies to activate, acquire, and achieve massive success. The 3 A's. I love that, Charlie. So please help me welcome to the show, Mr. Charlie Cina. Charlie, I'm excited to have you on here. I've heard great things about you from a good friend that actually knows you. And what I do is I love talking about human behavior and how that really applies to being a top performer, top sales coach, entrepreneur. So I'm pumped to have you on with us today. And I wanted to kind of dive right into your story and let's say give our listeners kind of a feel for your background and really how you arrived at this point in your life where you're one of the elite authorities on sales, persuasion, and influence. Like, how the heck did it all start for you?
Actually, it started by me delivering newspapers and dragging my wagon through the snow on cold winter days in Buffalo, New York. And then realizing that the more papers I delivered, the more money I would make by selling a subscription. And then when I would go to collect once a week, people would give me tips.
Yeah.
And then at Christmas time, I would get tips or, a holiday. So I learned at a really young age that the more you introduce, the more you produce.
Sure.
So that's really where I started my sales career and understood the whole concept of distributing a product or service and then getting a piece of that revenue that, that you move through the various sales and marketing channels.
Yeah, the more you're in front of people, the better you're going to do, of course, right? And maybe you can describe us some of your biggest successes as in terms of like awards or accolades. Like, how did you get so good? How did you become like such a leading authority on sales and marketing and persuasion?
Well, as far as accolades, I mean, I don't know that I could point out any other accolades other than me telling you about what successes that I've had in sales.
Yeah.
And I believe that everybody should know how to present and position themselves, no matter what business that they're in. So when I wrote my book, because I had worked with so many speakers, trainers, and sales experts,
Mm-hmm.
I felt that there was a void in the marketplace for sales, because the reality is very few people actually like to sell or go through the sales process, right?
Sure.
You hear people say, I don't want to be pushy, or I don't feel comfortable, or I feel like I'm, deceiving people when I try to sell them something. Well,
Sure.
You need to come from a place of good intention. You need to believe in your product and service. So all of those things that you hear that are, basic fundamentals of, best intention, common courtesy, and life need to come into play. But all that being said, the void I saw was, it's not about selling, it's about presenting. It's not about, being pushy, it's about positioning yourself.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
the book is a very simple read, and my whole game plan was to teach people how to present themselves in a way that's unforgettable at the first point of contact. How do you master the art of introduction? How do you shake a hand? And now in these uncertain times of shaking hands,
Elbow
not
bump.
politically correct anymore, right? But how do you
Right.
make eye contact? How do you smile? How do you articulately say who you are, what you do, and what problem you help people solve
Yeah.
in 10 seconds or less?
Sure.
And that whole formula, if you will, or concept, not only can be done in person, but it can be done on your websites, from a podcast, from a stage, or wherever. So my big thing is when somebody asks you, what do you do? How do you respond?
Well, yeah, you have to learn, instead of telling them what you do, which will just go in one ear out the other because everybody says that, it's telling them how what you do helps other people. That's what it's all about. It's how what you do helps other people. And that creates curiosity, where they want to engage and further that conversation. Because if they said, well, what do you do? Well, let's say if you sold real estate, well, I sell real estate. Well, what does that mean? That means you just commoditize yourself along all the other realtors that they know, and you're no different than anybody. But if you tell them how what you do solves other people's problems, you just set yourself up now to be more of an authority figure in the first, 10 to 30 seconds
or less, right? So my whole concept is, you've heard the term, you had me at
hello.
Hello. So I believe 80% of a transaction, if that client is a prospect, right, will allow you to then only have to build that relationship to close that 20% gap. So if I just met you on a plane or a train and you said, what do you do? I might say to you something to the effect of, I empower speakers, trainers, and subject matter experts, Jeremy, just like you, to monetize your content online and offline, guaranteed through my 3-step process.
Yeah. And that's going to create curiosity, right?
Now, what's my 3-step process?
Yeah.
Well, I teach you how to present, position, and profit. I'm going to teach you how to present yourself in a way that's unforgettable, online and offline, so you become the only logical choice.
Yeah.
I'm going to teach you how to position yourself in your space so you dominate. And I'm going to teach you how to profit by acquiring high-level clients. And then I'm going to teach you how to nurture those clients to get repeat and referral business long-term.
Yeah.
Now, again, we're going through it and we're kind of role-playing. But when you're catching somebody out of the gate like that, subconsciously in their brain, they're going, wow, this person has their stuff together. They really know what they're talking about. I need that.
Yeah.
And then they're going to come back to you almost, it's like when you say guaranteed through my 3-step process and you hit them with the 3-step process, it's a reverse call to action. So now they want what you have versus you having to convince them that you have what they need.
100%. Yeah. You want to use techniques that work with human behavior, whereas most salespeople, most business owners, when they're talking to a prospect, are using techniques that actually work against human behavior, where that wall goes up, right? And it automatically makes that person skeptical or cautious that you're trying to stuff your solution down their throat. So you have to learn certain wording and certain questions you're asking right in the beginning to help trigger them to want to engage. It's just like if I was talking to somebody and said, well, what do you do for a living? Well, if I said, well, I own 7th Level, it's a sales training company. Well, what does that mean? I just commoditize myself. But if I said, well, you know how a lot of business owners nowadays are sometimes get frustrated by, losing sales to low-cost competitors. They're concerned about the high attrition of always having to replace salespeople because they quit so much because they can't take it. And really sometimes just frustrated that their teams are inconsistently hitting their sales goals. So that'd be the first part of that. And they'd be like, yeah, because something is going to resonate with them like, oh, that's me. Well, what I do is we help companies like that by coming in, changing the way they communicate and changing the questions they're asking so they can actually start making sales that they really could be making. Now, what do you do for a living? Or what do you do for work? That type of thing. So that triggers how I list 2 or 3 generic problems that I know that most people I talk to have if they're a business owner, and how what I do helps them solve that. But I'm not going into a long, elaborate sales pitch. I call that my personalized intro, where it causes curiosity, where they want to engage, right? I'm not trying to sell them in 30 seconds. I'm just trying to create a conversation where they want to engage with me. Right. I love what you just said. That it makes complete sense.
You just used the word triggered. And what I like to say is words trigger pictures, which trigger emotions, which lead to action steps.
Yeah.
Right. So when you use the right words that trigger the right pictures, that trigger the right emotions, then people will engage and they'll take action. So in 10 seconds or less, again, if I met you on a plane or a train and you said, what do you do? Well, I own an electronics store.
Sure.
Right.
What does that mean?
Great. Well, what do you do, Charlie? Well, I empower business owners, entrepreneurs, and sales professionals just like you to shorten your sales cycle and increase revenue guaranteed through my 3-step process.
Yeah. They're going to want to know what that 3-step process is.
Right. Now, if they don't come back to me after that and ask me what the 3-step process is, I just sorted and sifted them and separated them as a suspect and not a prospect. So once you can really hone in on your power presentation, and it's simple, but getting the right words and putting it all together is complex, right? It takes a little while and it takes a little bit of thought and experimentation. But all that being said, when you can do that, now you can take advantage of the organic opportunities that are right in front of you, whether it be online or offline. So whether you're verbalizing it, while you're in Starbucks getting a cup of coffee because you cross paths with somebody, whether you're on a podcast and they say, Charlie, what do you do? Or it's your website or your LinkedIn profile. When you can use those words where they have impact, pique people's interest, now you will be able to identify the prospects from the suspects, and ultimately that will help you shorten
your sales cycle because you're speaking to the right person. That leads us into our next question. Like in your thoughts, like in your mind, how important is it for any person, no matter if they're sales or not, to actually have the ability to sell in today's competitive environment?
Well, again, you could use the word sell. You can use the word persuade. You can use the word influence, right? That's the big buzzword. Oh, they're influencers on social media. Well, what are they doing? They're selling you. They're persuading you. They're getting you to come over to, their side of the fence, for lack of a term. And ultimately, you're creating a like mind. Right? Where people are saying, yeah, I understand. I agree with you with that position. Or yes, I definitely not want that product, or I definitely want that service. So it doesn't matter what business that you're in. Even my kids, I now have a 16-year-old. My son just graduated. He's going into college. He's 18. Yeah. Since they were little, if they got a bad grade, we'll go talk to your teacher. Well, no, I can't go talk. The grade's done. I got a C and I wanted to get an A. Well, then go talk to your teacher. And ask them if you could do extra credit. Like you have to go back in, you have to state your case, and you have to have persuasion skills in order for you to accelerate and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, and it's sad, but it's really not taught. It's not taught in our school system, right? Like it's probably one of the biggest life skills a person really has to understand, whether you're in sales or not. Because here's my suggestion: we're all in sales. It does not matter your job, your profession. Whatever you do, you're still out there every day trying to persuade, influence, and convince. You're in the business of moving others. Even if you don't make a commission, for selling. You know, I call that non-sales selling, right? But let's say, you know, give you a few examples. Let's say that you're an employee and you're trying to convince your boss to give you a pay raise. Well, you're trying to persuade, influence, and convince others. If you're the boss, let's say you own the company and you're trying to get your employees to follow your vision of where you want to take your company, well, you're trying to persuade and influence and move others, right? If you're an attorney who's trying to convince the jury that your client is innocent,
yep,
you're trying to persuade him. I mean, heck's sake, with all the politics going on, if you're a politician who's trying to convince people to vote for you, you are trying to persuade, influence, and convince others. So it does not matter what you do. In our day and age, you have to learn persuasion and sales skills if you want to be at the top, if you want to be a top earner in anything or accomplish what you want in your life. Even if you have a charity, you still have to learn and persuade to get people to give you money for that charity. So I 100% agree. What do you feel are a few of the biggest mistakes that salespeople make in your thought process?
Well, here's the biggest void mistake. There's A to Z selling, right? You have to start at A, go B, C, D, right? And go to the close.
Yeah.
What I see as a big mistake is most people don't start off at A.
Yeah.
And they don't make it part of their daily routine. Mm-hmm. So what I mean by that is people aren't marketing, selling, and promoting on a constant basis. Even seasoned salespeople. I had an insurance guy in my office 3 or 4, maybe it's 5 months ago now, came in my office for a reason to look at a product and service that I offer, because I work with a lot of speakers, trainers, and subject matter experts and help them create online training platforms. Mm-hmm. Came into my office and never asked me for my business.
Right.
I even told him that I had a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old car insurance. Like, I threw it out there, never asked me. So when I wrote the book, Expose and Close, my whole thing is every day you should be shouting from the rooftops who you are, what you do. Yeah. That's where the sales process starts. And if people just did that, they would start to progress by inches and then build their sales skills as they go. So what a lot of people do is they think about sales and they think about the close. Yeah. Well, the close only happens after you've built a solid relationship and properly reached out to someone and made sure that they were a prospect and they had clarity on who you are, what you do, what problem you can help them solve. Yeah. Now you set up that call or you set up that meeting. Now you should be 80% of the way done, because now you're just going to go through the formalities and then you can build on your closing techniques, increase your product knowledge, or whatever it might take to close upon that deal. So that's a void that frustrates me. Everybody goes in and says, okay, I want to train my salespeople, or I want to train as a salesperson. Yeah. And they go in and they're starting at, D, E, or F, and they should be starting at A and then the process.
You got to get the basics down. And I think one of the biggest problems and challenges that salespeople have is when they go to their company and work for them, because we, even like our largest client is Google AdWords. We train for their divisions. And when I asked, what type of training have they been going through, so I have a bigger picture of what they've learned, they said, well, we got lots of training. But when I pulled the curtain back, pretty much just product training, features, benefits. This product does this, it does that. It's so great because of this or that. And they thought that they could just use their name and then everybody that would want to buy it from them just because they were the big name. But nothing could be further from the truth. So it's all about most salespeople, and I hate to say this, when they're taught early on, let's say they get out of college and get their first job in sales, or let's say they're midlife crisis and they go into sales from a different profession, doesn't matter, but companies train them. And what I see a lot of old school sales trainers train them how to be is what I call product pushers. Correct. They're product pushers. Okay. And here's what I mean by product pushers. What do most salespeople do? When they have that meeting, they have that call, they'll ask a few logical based questions like, oh, John, what's your biggest problems that keep you awake at night? Which every salesperson asks. It's so overused, okay? And then they tell them a few problems, and they go right into their pitch, talking about the features and benefits and how they have the best this and the best that. And they talk down their competition. And it's like taking a bucket of mud, and throwing it up against the wall, hoping and praying that something we're going to say is just going to stick and trigger that prospect to want to buy from us. And I call that hopium. It's a drug that so many salespeople and business owners are on, where they just hope and pray that something they're going to say in that presentation is just going to trigger that person to want to buy from them. And in such a hard and such an unpredictable way to even make a living. In our day and age, we have to be what I call problem finders. Okay. We have to be even better at problem finding, even more than problem solving, because we have to be able to help our prospects uncover challenges and problems that they might not have even known they had. Or maybe they knew about the problem, but they didn't know how bad it was. Or maybe they knew they had the problem, it was bad, but how worse it could get if they don't do anything. Because if we can't ask certain questions that help them uncover those problems in their mind, it's impossible for them to buy from you so that you can even solve their problems. So in our day, you have to be even better at problem finding than problem solving, because if they don't buy, you can't solve any of their problems. So I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah, and again, that's why I go back to the beginning, right? You had me at hello. When you can articulate through your power presentation who you are, what you do, and what problem you can help people solve, you're actually persuading. I don't know if you know Robert Cialdini.
Yeah, I've read that book.
Yeah, well, I didn't know. I used to call it, it was called, preframing or setting up people in advance, right? But I read that book about a year ago. I saw him speak at a national speakers conference, and I heard the word persuasion. But what you're doing out of the gate is you're overcoming all of the subconscious objections in advance. So by the time you have that phone call, or by the time you have that one-on-one meeting, the guard is dropped down, and then the potential client, right? The prospect, the potential client is going to be much more open to receiving what you have to deliver. And then if you're articulating your presentation correctly, you should be able to overcome the objections that they're going to have in your presentation. So by the time they get to the end, it's just a simple.
It's all about objection prevention.
Yes or no. Bingo.
You're preventing the objections before they even happen in their mind.
Yeah, so that's the key. So it's like anything else. You never have a second chance to make a first impression.
100%.
Okay, I agree with that, but I think in sales, if you do it right, I've closed deals doing exactly what I'm explaining to you on planes, in lobbies of hotels. I mean, I closed one deal at a 10X conference at Mandalay Bay. I was on my laptop, just like the same one I'm talking to you on right now. Gentleman sits next to me with his baby and said, "What do you do?" He said, what do you do? And he said, "I'm a speaker and a trainer." And I said, "What do you do?" And he said, "Well, I coach people." Excuse me. I said to him, "What do you do?" He said, "I'm a coach and I'm a trainer." And then he asked me what I did. I gave him my power pitch.
Yeah.
Less than 30 minutes, he literally in the lobby gave me his credit card, and we did a $5,000 transaction. So it works.
Yeah.
And when you can keep it simple and you come from a place of good intention, and you can show truth, authenticity, and proof through your process that you're coming from a place of good intention and your product or service has worked, and here's what it works for, your closing percentage is going to go up without question.
Going to skyrocket. And I want to know a little bit more about, you work with a lot of top speakers, a lot of top trainers on the planet. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, how did that happen for you? I know you work with Tony Robbins, some of the others. Tell us a little bit more about that. I know everybody wants to know.
Yeah. Well, short story is 2012. I was in the design and construction business. Obviously 2008, right? Everybody took a hit, but I was still in the game. I was still swinging, and I got a call to go do some commercial shades. I don't know if you've ever seen the big shades in Starbucks that are perforated, right? The solar shades. Yeah. So I The job, it was a 911 call. The job happened to be literally less than a mile from my house. I went in, I installed the shades. Long story short, when my installer put them in, he made a little bit of a mistake. So I had to go back to take a look at the install to make sure it was done properly. And I ran into a friend of mine that owns a company called Lightspeed VT. I don't know if you know Bradley.
I do my virtual training platforms with his company.
So, okay, so you're a client, you're a Lightspeed client. So Brad pulled me in his office and he said, hey man, what are you doing? I said, well, I've got several companies. And he's like, you think you could just help, can you start helping me to sell this product? He showed me a demo. I said, man, I'm swamped, but I fell in love with the product. And I just took it on as kind of another source of revenue with all the different clients and people that I knew here in Vegas and nationwide. And then it just started to take off. I ended up, going to an event and I'd make a contact and, one thing led to another. And then I became very immersed in the business and started acquiring people like the Tony Robbins and the Les Browns and the Eric Thomases. I cold called the Cake Boss. I don't know if you know the show, The Cake Boss.
I've heard, Bravo or which?
Yeah, he's been on TV for forever. But, cold called him. A couple of weeks later, we're on a plane. We're putting a deal together with him.
Yeah.
John Taffer from Bar Rescue. I don't know if you know that show. He goes in and revamps the bars and the restaurants.
Bars, right.
Yeah, but he's been on TV now for years. So I got more immersed in the business, fell in love with the business, got to work with a lot of, mentors or collaborate with a lot of people that I grew up with early in sales. Tom Hopkins was walking through the office one day and he's sitting in my office, just kind of BSing with me and talking sales. So that's how I ended up getting into this. And then, just through sheer evolution and what I'm explaining to you and your audience, that's how I acquired these people. A gentleman showed up at my office, a young guy about 3 years ago now, 3.5 years ago. And I started mentoring him, right? He came in my office cold. He said he heard me on a podcast or saw me on a YouTube video, and he just wanted to come in and meet me. And he wanted to learn more about how I closed and got to John Taffer.
Right.
And I looked at him. He said, "What's the secret?" And I said, "Well, I just expose and close."
Right.
He said, "Oh, so you have an expose and close, like a system, like a marketing system?" And I'm like, yes, I do. And I was in the middle of writing my book,
right.
And I was going to call it "Hi, What's Your Name?"
Sure.
Right? Because I told people, you want $1 million question? Just go out and ask 10 people a day, wherever you are, "Hi, what's your name?"
Sure.
Right? That's my whole concept. That's what I do. So whether I'm at a conference, whether I'm on a plane, a train, on vacation, I'm on a boat, doesn't matter. I'm going to reach out because that person next to me has a couple things that I want. A, revenue, right? Or B, contacts. And that's not a bad thing if what you're offering is coming from a place of good intention and you believe in your product or service. So that's how I got into this, this business. And I use everything that I explained in my book and what we're discussing. That's how I built all my businesses.
What do you think is the role of trust in sales, in the sales and persuasion process?
Well, again, not to be redundant, but I'm being redundant, right? It starts at hello. It starts with a handshake. It starts with eye contact. It starts with the right words that trigger the right pictures, that trigger the right emotions.
Sure.
That will build a certain level of immediate trust because subconsciously the brain's going, I like this gentleman, or I like this lady or young woman or young man, or whatever the case may be. Now you're getting into conversations. And by having the right words and knowing the path that you want to take people on, again, with the best intention, with truth, authenticity of proof of who you are and what you've done, and being able to back up what you're saying as far as your product or service goes, you will have conversations that will convert. And now you're not selling, you're presenting.
Sure.
Right? It's not a forced sale. You're just persuading people because, they're liking you, or they're falling in love with what you're having to say, and they're making the decision that your product or service can fill a void.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. It's all about self-persuasion. What you just described there is helping that prospect persuade themselves rather than you trying to persuade them. So much easier to sell. I always tell salespeople in companies, there are 3 errors of the sales process. You have error number 1, which is what I call boiler room selling, like Wolf on Wall Street. You manipulate them, you posture them, you push them into doing something that you want to do. It's the ABCs of closing. You're always closing, you're assuming the sale, you're enthusiastic when you sell. If somehow you get excited about your product, that the prospect is magically going to get excited as well, and hey, I've got a great opportunity for you. It's that type of salesmanship. That's error 1.
I'm going to have to disagree with 50% of that statement. And what I mean by that, I agree with you that the quote boiler room selling, right? It's a hard close when it's not coming from a place of good intention, right? In most instances, to your point, you're going to take that and you're just going to sell it to them because you want to close the deal. It may or may not help them. They may or may not want it. That is a hard close with ill intention.
Sure.
However, if you're a sales consultant and you know that Jeremy needs a product or service, Jeremy could really use this water based upon the problems that he's having, based upon you having clarity of what his needs and wants are, and you're coming from a place of good intention, Jeremy's just not certain that this water is going to work for him, then I personally don't think it's improper to convince and persuade Jeremy on a higher level, preferably through educating him in the process.
Here's what I'm suggesting.
To close that deal.
Yeah, and I'm not meaning you shouldn't close a deal. Let me go with it a little bit more. It'd probably make more sense to you. So
but again, I want to make sure your audience is clear, because I agree with you, but on the flip side, I don't want people to walk away from a deal or stop short in the process just because they got to know, because that's when salesmanship.
Oh, I promise you they won't. I'll explain it to you so it makes sense to you. So error number 1, you have boiler room selling, right? You're selling on the opportunity. You are extremely aggressive and pushy. In today's age, with people being more skeptical and cautious ever, triggers sales resistance 100%. Data shows that, behavioral science, right? Then you have error number 2 that came out in the 90s, which what we would call consultative selling. And in the 90s, they taught you had to ask certain questions to find out their needs or what are the problems of the customer. And that sounds great, but the only problem is when we only ask logical-based questions, what type of answers are our prospects going to give us back? Logical-based answers. So when we say, hey, John, what are some things that keep you awake at night? What are some problems that you have that keep you awake at night? Or what solution are you looking for? These are so generic consultative questions that every buyer has heard all of the time. So once again, more persuasive than pushing, telling your story, posturing them, assuming the sale, especially if you're in a more complex selling environment that requires more than one call, but you're still having to play the numbers game because very little emotion is brought out by simply asking logical-based questions. And as we know, according from human psychology, people base their decisions on 100% emotion now. It's just a proven brain study fact. They justify with logic. Now we're in error number 3, and we're the most persuasive when we allow others to persuade themselves, when we ask what I call neuro-emotional persuasion questions that triggers that emotion to give us more of their problems. We call that dialogue when we ask those type of questions. Now, how do you do that though? Can you just show up and say, hey, Mr. Prospect, go ahead and persuade yourself and, oh, by the way, write me out a check? No. You have to learn certain specific skilled questions, when and how to ask those questions in a certain process that get your prospect to want to be open up to you and actually persuade themselves that they have to solve the problems that your questions have allowed them to think about that they didn't even have. So we're in error number 3. Now, here's the challenge. most salespeople are still selling using techniques from error 1 and error 2, but today's customers, today's consumers, buyers are in error number 3. And that's why so many salespeople struggle, because they use sales techniques that work against human behavior instead of learning techniques that work with human behavior. So if you're listening to this and you're still using error 1 and error 2 techniques that have been around since the Stone Ages of selling, you have to learn how to meet your buyer where they are and how they think in our day and age, because they are completely different in 2020 than they were even 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. Consumer buying behavior is completely different. Does that make sense to you? That's what I meant by that.
Yeah, absolutely, positively. The reality is, what you're saying is the dots need to be connected, and most salespeople don't know how to connect the dots.
Yeah, they just haven't learned what the dots even are. They don't even know what selling actually means or what selling is, right? They think selling is giving a pitch so you can make money. No, selling is all about finding and helping people solve their problems. And when you have that type of mentality and that mindset, it comes across to your potential prospects that you're talking to.
No question. And that's why I say truth, authenticity, and proof. If your
100%.
presentation doesn't have truth in it, you're done. If you're not authentic in the sales process, right?
Yeah.
Boiler room pitch. Well, if you're, then you're not being authentic, because you're trying to sell that product and get that person to say yes at all costs, right? You may be trying to put a round peg in a square hole. However, if the person needs it and wants it, and they're truly a prospect, and you know that you can help them, now you come from a place of truth and authenticity, and you can show them proof that it works. You will convert at a higher level. And if you utilize these basic personality traits, attributes, practices, your closing percentage, even if you're just an average or maybe an above average salesperson, your closing percentage will in fact go up.
Well, sure. You have an obligation to help that person want to change their situation. Selling is all about change. It's about helping that person feel tension that they want to resolve. Okay. If you can ask the right questions that help them feel that tension that they have to resolve, and only your product or service can resolve that for them, because that's how they view you, as more of the trusted authority in that process, because of your questioning ability. They don't feel like you're just there to sell them something. They feel like you're there to help them solve their challenges and their problems. That's when your closing percentages go out the roof. That's when you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year as a salesperson, or even millions of dollars a year, even as an employee. I see that all the time. I want to ask you this question though. What do you do, because we've only got about 5 more minutes here, what do you do to practice your craft daily? What are a couple habits that salespeople can do to really practice their craft?
Well, I get up every morning and I'll make my coffee and I'll sit in my chair and I will plug in to a YouTube video, some form of, meditative video, and, or plug into even a webinar. So I'm constantly taking a minimum of 10 minutes a day to listen to something that's going to feed me with a new thought, reinforce an old thought, or, fire up or rekindle a memory that I forgot about, right? Something you learned, 10 years ago, and you forgot it even happened. You're like, oh man, why didn't I think of that? So I'm constantly trying to move in that regard. I plug into webinars, and prior to the whole pandemic, I always tried to attend at least, 2 to 3 live events and mentor under somebody.
Yeah.
So, I've worked with various mentors over the years. From back in my early days, I mentioned to you Tom Hopkins, Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins, and then I've actually hired, mentors and coaches myself, because you can't always be accountable you're accountable to yourself, but having somebody else to be accountable to,
100%.
having somebody else, reach or put new thoughts into your mind,
Yeah.
to me is paramount. So that's something that I do to constantly practice.
Which is like a good friend of yours and mine, Brad Lee teaches, is training something that you did or is training something that you do?
No question.
Like if you want to be at the top of your profession, if you want to be a top athlete and you want to go to the NBA, well, you have to out-train other people. It's just like if LeBron James, he had a great rookie year. Did he just stop training? No, he has a coach that he learns from, right? Tiger Woods has a golf coach. He's one of the best ever, if not the best golfer ever, but he still has someone who trains him to hone in his craft so he can get better. It's the same thing in sales. If you're not continually learning and learning the right skills, the right skills to communicate with today's information age buyer, you're really losing sales that you could be making for your family, that you could be making for your company, and they could be making for yourself, and really for those people that really have problems that you could solve, but because your communication skills are off, you're not able to get that person to want to buy from you where you can actually help them change their situation. So 100%, it's all about training. Charlie, I can't thank you enough for joining us here today. Your time is very valuable. I know we wanted to stay to about 40 minutes or less. Do you have any final advice for our listeners before we go?
Well, the only piece of final advice I can give, I use the word disciple of sales or sales disciple, right? To your point, this is a necessary life skill that you should be educating yourself on ongoing so you could elevate yourself, so you could dominate your space.
Yeah.
Right? Once you continue to educate yourself, then you can educate others. So if there's, entrepreneurs or business owners that have sales teams, how do you get better? You need to educate yourself to elevate yourself. Once you do that, now you're educating others and you're elevating them so they can in turn dominate their space. Now you're building a company, you're building a sales team, you're building a scalable entity, and you're making positive moves and doing transactions that matter and ultimately help you generate revenue relationships long-term.
100%. Where can our listeners learn more about you and your training? Where can they go?
So I have, you can go to charliecina.com. Okay. It's Charlie, CharlieCina.com. And my virtual interactive training platform is exposeandclose.com. Just like it sounds, EXPOSE and close.com. And right now what I'm doing with this unfortunate, crazy circumstance that we're all in, right? Every day's a new day here after the 90-day lockdown. We don't know if we're back or not back or what have you, but anybody that would like to train with me on my virtual online platform, if you go in and use code SUCCESS50, I'll give all of your audience 50% off.
I love that. So go to exposeandclose.com.
Correct.
And when they enter in, what's the promo code?
It's SUCCESS50.
SUCCESS50.
Yeah, so
I encourage all of you to do that are listening today. If you want to be the best at sales, if you want to increase your sales, you want to increase your income for you and your family, you've got to learn new skills from people who've actually paved that path, from people like Charlie who've already had tons of success in sales and persuasion, and really follow what they teach you how to do, and then you can get the same results. So exposeandclose.com and enter in that promo code. Charlie, thanks for having us on. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. It was a pleasure as well.
Now, if you're serious about joining the top 1%, I mean the top 1%, and you want to experience more training content just like this, click the links right over there. Right over there, they're exactly what you need to see next. You see, I release new episodes featuring top salespeople and sales authorities, multiple six-figure, high six-figure, even seven-figure earners every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday every single week at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you're new here, do yourself a favor and smash that subscribe button right below, and join our new Facebook group, Sales Revolution. You see, it's free, and there's a link in the description below just for you. We put it there for you. Finally, I make posts on Facebook and Instagram each and every day with more tips and training. So be sure and follow me and turn on your notifications. So make a comment in the first 7 minutes to any of my latest posts, share this episode, and there's a very real chance that you're gonna win some killer prizes. And here's the thing, don't sit on the sidelines. Don't be like everyone else. Get into the game. Join the sales revolution. Stay active, get involved, learn the right skills, and we will show you how to take your life and income to a level that most only dream about. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.